Good afternoon, good evening, folks. Welcome to the Tampa Bay IIBA Florida Chapter Study Group for June 2020. This is our first one in June. This is our 37th consecutive class. Our goal and mission here is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the Tampa Bay IT community. Not only do we work in Tampa Bay, we also have all of Northern Florida, and we have folks joining us from all over the world. One of our future board members is living in Africa at the moment. So no matter where you are, if you want to be part of our study group or part of our chapter, go ahead and join the IIBA, and you can tell them that you want the Tampa Bay chapter to be your home chapter, and we will welcome you with open arms. Benefits of being in the IIBA with Tampa Bay is not only do you get access to a huge, incredible library with the IIBA that has everything that you would want for as a business analyst, project manager. It has Agile, it has Lean, it has a lot of other really good documents and instructions. But we also have in our own midst, Bob Churchill, who is our resident SME of all things interesting. We also have mentoring, resume review, networking, mentoring for your not only your career and your business, but if you have other issues that you would like to have mentored, just engage with us. You can reach us in a variety of ways. We have our meetup and Zoom, which you are on one of the two now. Our past meeting recordings is here highlighted in turquoise. If you'd like to see the other 36 meetings, we have maybe 35 of them recorded. The IIBA website is here, our website, Meetup, Facebook, and our two LinkedIn groups. You know that we are a volunteer-run organization. Our board is led by Cliff Gray. Lori is our treasurer, vice president of finance. Caitlin and Priscilla are board members at large. Our study group leaders is myself. My name is Thea Raisins. I'm the vice president of career professional development, and occasionally Tiffany will lean in and help run the study group. As I said, we have our resident SME. His name is Bob Churchill. He actually doesn't even live in Tampa. He lives halfway across the state, and he very often either telecommutes or commutes to our events. He has earned his CBAP certification from the International Institute of Business Analysis, or the IIBA. He's also earned a variety of other letters behind his name, including PMP, which is Project Management Professional from the Project Management Institute. His CSM is CSPO. This is Certified Scrum Product Owner. CSD, he has his Lean, he has a Six Sigma Black Belt, and I have no doubt that there are other things that he's earned that he's not bragging about. You can see his website here. This is where he has a variety of very interesting topics. Some of it's mechanical engineering, Lean, Six Sigma, process analysis. He has a blog that he has put many of the articles he's created for our organization on that as well. So if you'd like to peruse that or contact him directly, Bob at rpchurchill.com. He is very responsive and wonderful. Okay, today's meeting is actually, Bob is going to run the entire thing, talking about the framework that he's come up with after many, many years of experience, deep experience, and things that I haven't been able to get into, process, flow, logistics. I'm just really excited to see this again. He's talked about it in the past a little bit, but this is kind of the overall view. He's going to start out with what made him decide to do this. So I'm going to turn the screen over to Bob. Okay, Bob, take it away.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. So the reason I put this together, I ended up getting my CBAP and studying for it in middle of 2017. And I was spending a lot of time blogging, going to meetups, like crazy meetups, 2 or 3 a week. and really learning a lot and thinking about a lot. And when I became familiar with the material in the BABOK, because I'd done so many things over the years, it all made sense to me. It was really easy for me because anything they talked about, I could put a picture to. But I also had the feeling that more the information in the BABOK is great and it's all correct and it's all well written and it all makes sense. It's just a bunch of stuff and it doesn't always have a flowing narrative to it that proceeds in the way I think about doing the work I've done in many industries and using the same skills over and over. So I know that if somebody looks at my resume, they'll say, I don't see a narrative thread, which I've heard, or you don't do what we do, which I've heard. I know that every time I went to a new industry or a new job, I instinctively knew what to do. Now, I had to learn the subject matter material for that industry, but the process of analyzing and solving problems and coming up with solutions for customers never really changes, nor does the process of communicating with customers. So I'll touch on all those in this presentation today, which I will keep as brief as possible. One other thing happened that really started to put shape to it. I was attending a PHP meetup fairly regularly. And one of the principals in that meetup put together a presentation on domain-driven design. And that really started to crystallize things in my head. And it led me to put together my own presentation where I really solidified what I'm trying to get at. The other major inspiration for the framework is one of the companies I work for did an independent B&B of a third-party simulation for a very large government program. And I took the best parts of that spec according to which the Airbnb was done and distilled that down into something usable. There are other presentations where I talk about what's in that spec and I link to it. And I'll tell you, the guy that came up with it is a older PhD with a giant ego, and that guy is a real piece of work. He'll make an impression on you and not necessarily in the best way. But what he was trying to accomplish really made sense. And after I got my CBAP and jumbled all this around, within 6 months, I was doing presentations on this framework to different chapters of the IIBA. And I have improved it and tweaked it since, and I continue to add to and modify. So what I'm giving you today is the most streamlined thing I can. I'm not gonna talk to every point on the slides that I actually wrote. I'll just try to talk to the pictures to give you an idea. We'll see if we can break periodically for questions. And the reason I think this is important, and I'm excited to share it with you, is because I think it really puts all the information the BABOK provides into a context you can really use. All right, so if you're going to do a project, you basically start by planning it and you end by closing it. So that should come as no surprise. The next thing is you have to figure out what it's for, what problem it's trying to solve, what business value it's trying to provide. And then you do assumptions, capabilities, limitations, and risks and impacts. That's kind of a loose phase that really happens across all the other phases. Then you do a conceptual model, which is basically the as is state. That's where you figure out what's going on now, if there is a now. Now, sometimes there isn't, you're doing something completely new, and you'll still do the same work, you'll just do it inside the design work and kind of in the requirements. Then you'll deal with data, you'll find out what you need, how to get it, and you'll collect it and make it usable. Then you'll do the functional and non-functional requirements. You'll figure out what your customers need. Then you will design the actual solution, and then you'll actually build it and you'll test it and you'll gain acceptance and deploy it and deliver it, and bada bing, there you go, right? Now that seems pretty mindless, but it's also a good idea sometimes just to put words to everything in order so you know what you need. Now, if we simplify this to the core bit and we take away the management wrapper, we basically have figure out the problem, figure out the as is, figure out the data, find identify what we need, figure out how we're going to address it, and test it. And then we're gonna simplify it even more, and we're gonna just say the data happens as part of all the other operations that we do. So
Sorry to interrupt. Can I interrupt you, Bob, if you don't mind?
yeah.
Yeah, can you go back to the previous slide? So this framework I utilized in my senior design project. It's we utilize the same method, same framework, and then we had to do a complete analysis on a restaurant. So I just graduated in December, so my senior design project was as is and to be. So we were given an assignment on a technology restaurant, and we had to improve the technology. So we did a complete analysis on the, as is state. We followed the same model, same framework, and then we assessed all their technology, their needs, their requirements, their quantification, the cost, the hardware, the personnel, right? What it does, like the functional, the non-functional, like the maintenance. The non-functional would be the maintenance, right? How much it costs to maintain the technology? That would be non-functional. And then the design, like we analyze the design. So I followed the same framework, and I learned so much in my senior design.
Yeah,
That's why I couldn't remember.
that's what
And then
everyone
implementation, yeah.
does.
Yeah, we
So,
tested. We did a test. We tested the actual product, like the product we chose, right? And then we had to decide how we're going to implement it, right? Following the same framework in the class. And then we did a usability. Like we did a usability test on the actual as is, like the equipment they had before, and 2B, right? And then that was the usability test. And then the output, like what was the, how is technology going to be? So what is the output be the results of the project, right? What are the, how is the technology going to be improved from as is to be? What is the output? What is the purpose, right? So validation and verification. So that's how I remember this, because I've applied it in my senior design project.
great.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And everyone else has too, I'm sure. That's exactly what the BABOK says. Now, one thing the IIBA, as Thea tells us, wants to never do is be prescriptive. They never want to give you a thing where you do A, B, C, D, and you get a result, because it doesn't work that way. Well, yes and no. So this framework, this way of thinking about things, is actually very loose and flexible. So it applies to any management structure you've got. So if you're doing waterfall, in theory, you just go through and do them in order, and then you're done. As you all know, unless you're doing something completely trivial, it's always more complicated than that. But that's kind of the theoretical goal. And when you're doing Agile and Scrum, you're basically figuring out what's going on and figuring out the requirements, and continually adding things into a backlog. And then you're peeling them off to design, implement, test, and deploy them, right? Hopefully in order by priority and necessity and usability and design logic from a minimum viable product. But they're all the same phases, and they're all going on kind of at the same time. Different people are doing them, but they're all still there, and you always do the same things in the phases. A hybrid approach is where you will do the overall design and have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish from the beginning or close to it, and then you'll do the implementation in an agile way. Now, if you have an existing project or product or system and you're going to modify, then you do the conceptual model near the beginning, and that includes the operations of discovery, which is nouns and verbs and what's happening, and data collection, which characterizes everything. Those are the adjectives and adverbs. By contrast, if you're doing a new operation or a new system from scratch, like I said before, you'll do all the conceptual model stuff as part of the design. So you'll take whatever clever idea you had or technology and work backward from the outputs you want to figure out all the components and processes you need to generate them, and you do it in that phase. if you're doing anything with simulation to help with design and implementation, that'll be another project by itself, embedded within the larger project you're trying to do. As always, when you find this thing on my site, many of these slides have links at the bottom to other materials and longer articles. Feel free to go ahead and check those out. So this is a thing I refer to quite often. This is the way it's really done. You don't just do an intended use or identify a few things and go on never to revisit it, right? You always work with the customer and document it and have them review it and then accept it and then move to the next phase. And you'll do all your discovering that might involve many different activities, and you'll document that, have your customers review it, and you'll change it until you've all reached agreement that you understand everything that's going on the way they see it. And that continues on. Now, in any time, the reason they're backwards arrows as well as forwards arrows is when you identify something in a subsequent phase and you realize there needs to be an item in a previous phase, go back and revisit it. You might have to add something, delete something, or modify something. But this is ultimately, no matter what management framework you're using, you're always iterating, meaning doing over and over again all these phases, both within the phase and between phases. So let's look at what happens inside any phase. I'm working on a longer article that talks about this and the details within each phase. But for now, let's just look at a template. So one of these is one of these circles plus its arrows forwards and back. Now, obviously, if you're in the first one, there's no back. If you're in the last one, you're done, there's no forward, but all the ones in the middle are like this. So when you create an item, it kind of conceptually goes in a to-do column. When it's finished, it goes in the complete column and it stays there, right? And then it'll spawn items in the to-do column in the next phase. The top, middle, and bottom is just a way to think about all the in-work items. So if you're needing to break things down into a hierarchy, say epics, features, and tasks, you'll do it here. Or an aircraft into landing gear, wings, fuselage, engines, tail, control, electronics, navigation, yada, yada. You can have all those things. If you're doing discovery for conceptual model, you can say, okay, I need a satellite photo, a mechanical drawing, a bunch of pictures, a guided walkthrough, a bunch of interviews, a bunch of electronic data, a bunch of data collected by camera and broken down for time and motion. So there are a lot of ways you can do that. And when you produce the documentation that's reviewed, or you do the implementation that is reviewed, and then it's approved. And in the approved column, I basically showed that approvals can be given both serially and in parallel. So maybe you need 3 people to approve something before it's done, or maybe you need 1 person to do, and when it passes that person, somebody else needs to, right? And so that's what I'm showing there. This little half arrow shows that if I have to create something new based on an oversight identified in a future phase, I'll drop a new item in here, and things that don't pass review will go backwards to be reworked. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a question of achieving understanding and synchronization between all parties. All right, so ultimately, you can use a requirements traceability matrix. Every item should connect in both directions. These question marks here show where more items can be created in previous phases based on things you discover in a later phase. You can also have requirements for how you do things in each phase. There we go. So project planning basically uses traditional project management techniques. The PMBOK is very much like the BABOK. It's the same kind of book, same kind of way of thinking about things, and it applies no matter the management style you're using. You're supposed to start off with some kind of a charter that'll talk about your intended use, and you'll build the team, and then you'll close out whatever you open at the end. So let's look at the project planning oeuvre, or the framework for project management that comes out of the PMBOK. So you have the phases, which is initiating, so kicking the whole thing off, getting your stakeholders together, and figuring out what you're trying to accomplish. Then you plan relative to all these considerations, and then you execute and monitor and control. So once you get the things set up, all the BA type work and all the actual project work happens in those 2 phases. And anywhere there's an X, that's where you do something relative to that area of concern. And it looks like executing and monitoring and controlling are 2 separate phases, but they're really concurrent. So executing means doing the work, and monitoring and controlling means acting on feedback and making course corrections with the meta stuff. It's really all happening at the same time. And everything we do as BAs really happens in that part of the project. So while we're doing our thing, project managers will be doing theirs to support us. Sometimes people wear both hats, and BAs can absolutely be part of every phase, including initializing or initiating and planning and closing. So that's what that's about. The intended use is just identifying the problem, and typically you'll identify like 1 to 3 things. If you think about the Apollo program, the intended uses per John Kennedy's speech are land a man on the moon and return him safely to the earth. And that's 2, right? And there may be more, but those are the big ones. So generally your high level uses are going to be pretty minimal. And the assumptions and all that, they basically happen on the fly. And the main thing is simplifications or assumptions. If you don't have the information about something, you may omit the effect, and you may or may not deal with it. Whether you deal with something depends on how important it is to the project, to the outcome, to the stakeholders, whether you have data or not, and so on. Sometimes you might not have data actually in the real world, but you can make an assumption. So if you think of your project as an equation, the first thing you'll do is look at it and see which terms might be needed. So, for example, if your system isn't moving, and this is the first law of thermodynamics saying no energy is created or destroyed, if the system isn't moving or changing velocity, that whole term drops out. So that's a simplification. It's an assumption. It might not be an analogy that you're all comfortable with, but that's the way I think about it. All right, the conceptual model again is the as-is state, and maybe it exists and maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, you'll do it in design. There's no right or wrong way to do this, no tool, any tool or set of tools that builds mutual understanding between you and your customer is totally cool. So this is where BAs learn what they don't know. BAs are learning machines, and they're also translating machines, and they negotiate between the customers and implementers or technical teams or whatever, all the different parties. And there are a number of different techniques you use. I've talked about a bunch of them. And there are skills that go with every industry. That's part of the job too. But what we talk about almost completely is the general skills that we use for this, and not the specific skills having to do with every industry. Learning in a new field is called domain knowledge acquisition. Data means you just go out and identify where it's going to come from and what you need. The most important thing about data is you have to actually be able to get it. Requirements are what the system does. So this is an abstract to B state. It's a kind of a fuzzy notion of what your solution needs to be. It's broken down between functional and non-functional requirements. You know this already. Functional is what the system does, not functional is what it is. The design is.
Can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry to interrupt. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Here, give me 1 second. I want to take a look at this. I'm trying to. This is very important. Doing requirements. Just give me 1 second.
I actually like how you explain the difference between functional and non-functional. Very nice one.
You like that?
Can you give me a clear example what a functional?
Well, functional is the user needs to be able to click a button to make a scanner read in a document and then apply an index to it. So that's what the system does. A non-functional is what the system is. It needs to be able to do this without it needs to be able to do 100 documents an hour. So that's describing qualities of a system like performance, maintainability, robustness, flexibility, reliability, and so on. Those are all non-functional. Follow me?
Yeah, thank you. Now it's clear. I just wanted to clear things up. Thank you.
That's a hard distinction sometimes.
Non-functional requirements are often a question in interviews for business analysis. They'll ask you for some examples of functional and non-functional requirements, or they'll say which one is more important, functional or non-functional, which is a trick question. They're two hands of the same body.
Right. So the design, I think, should consider how you're going to maintain and run the system or product you're going to create, and not just dump it on your customers with no idea how to run it. Design is more about the solution than the engagement. I will revisit that in a little bit. The implementation is carried out based on the design. That also means deployment. Much of the language I'm using by default is typically in terms of making IT systems. That seems to be the bulk of what we do as BAs and what the field is really targeted to. But this applies to any kind of endeavor, actually. So then testing, there's two main kinds of testing. Verification is, does it work? If you hit a button, does it do the right thing? Does it read in the right data and spit out the right data? So validation is more, okay, it does it all correctly, but does what it does actually address your problem? That's what validation is. And sometimes the only validation you can get is some SME or manager or user saying, yep, that works, that's what I need, or a customer being happy, or someone saying, yeah, that feels right to me, or that's what I expect to happen. A lot of the verification type tests, those are more amenable to being automated. So those of you who know about programming and writing tests for test-driven development, those are the kind of tests you'll do for verification. There are many other kinds. So there may be dedicated people doing testing. Every implementation item may be tested a lot of different ways, but you should be aware of the kind of testing you're gonna need to do and prepare for that and build it into the entire effort. Acceptance just means having definitions of done and really making sure everything has passed the test. You might have training documentation and other requirements for handing a solution over to a customer, and they can completely accept it or totally reject it or partially accept it, and so that they can use it with a few limitations, and hopefully you'll go back and fix those. Then we close it. So now we've gone through the hard part. I want to cover a few things we talked about in previous weeks. So one dichotomy I want to point out is some of your work will really involve interacting with the customers and managing them and communicating with them and communicating with the implementation and technical teams and test teams. That's all the engagement. How you navigate through these phases, that's the engagement. So a lot of what we talk about in these meetings and in BA work is the engagement. But in reality, we're designing a solution for the customer, and that's a technical solution that does certain things and is certain things. So you need to be aware of that, and the need for that distinction will be made clear in a second. The other thing that happens, why BAs think their work may vary wildly if they talk to each other, is that they may not be involved in all these phases. They may only be doing discovery or listening for requirements or working out user testing or something. They may not be aware of the whole sweep of the process. So be aware that the entire process is happening. Get to know all the other participants, talk to the managers that are running it. It's very important to really help you understand the larger scope of any effort in your place in it. So last week we finished doing the 50 techniques. It probably took us 15 weeks to go through all 50. And what I did is I looked at all the techniques and wrote an article about it that talks about whether the technique mostly has to do with the solution or engagement or both. Now, in my estimation, I thought most of them really have to do with the solution. Some of them are engagement, and a small handful are for both. So you're welcome to check out that article and see if you agree with my assessments. If you think I'm wrong, let me know and we can talk about it. I always love to learn more, and I want to make this material as good as possible. The other thing is a lot of software tools are used by BAs. Over the last few years, I surveyed 5 audiences, and these were the most common tools they use. And many of them are for managing engagements. Some are for both really generalized tools like Excel and Word and Confluence. Very few are for only the solution, but like Visio, for example, or Visual Studio, and some are for both. So I thought that was interesting. One final thing is, once you build a system, anything you do to maintain it or modify it actually becomes its whole own project. So if you're, say, an external consultant and they call your team in to take a look at an existing system, and have you do some kind of project to improve it or change it in some way, you'll do a whole own project on your own for the customer, but it's really in this ongoing operation and maintenance phase. So just be aware that every system that's created from scratch has a full life cycle during which you build things and then you run it, maintain it. And that might take a year for those phases. That might take 10, right? And then when it's too old or obsolete or whatever, you'll end of life it, might be scrapping it, or you'll build a new and hopefully much better replacement. So those would be phases 7 and 8, and I talk about that in more detail. Here are the sections of the BABOK. For the CBAP, most of the questions are really going to come out of the 6 knowledge areas. When we did all the test questions from Watermark, I think it was, they were on these chapters. Then we talked about the techniques. We talked about the other stuff some. Next week, somebody is going to talk about perspective. I know one of the lower certifications, maybe the beginning one, the ECBA, I think, really concentrates on this area here in chapter 9. So why do I share that with you? If we look at chapters 3 through 8, these are the phases the BABOK identifies in its chapters, its knowledge areas. So you set it up and monitor, you talk to the customers, you figure out the requirements, you figure out your strategy and approach, you identify the requirements and do your design, then you do the solution. Well, what does that look like? It's another way of saying the same thing I just went over in these steps in my framework. And if you notice these, in every column I say, okay, is there, what activities do they have in column, in common? And a bold-X means they're really talking about the same thing. And the smaller X's is less so. And what you'll notice is the bold X's go mostly from upper left to lower right. So the BABOK's telling you exactly the same story, but it is not giving it to you in what I think is as clean a way. And that is the end. You all survived it. I hope that was somewhat useful. Do you have any comments, questions, brickbats, or what have you?
Is it possible to share the link for the presentation?
Yeah, I can do that. You can also find it as a blog post with today's date. And you can find it on my portfolio page in the presentations link. So it's in the chat now.
I'd like to go back to the functional and non-functional requirements slide. No matter what level you are as a BA, understanding what is a functional requirement versus what is non-functional will help. And it's typical that for every functional requirement, you're going to have one or more non-functional requirements. So whenever we're talking about things like meeting the Americans with Disabilities Act, you're going to have lots of non-functional requirements. And you need to be sure that if your project is not, if your project is public facing, that it is considering the ADA guidelines, because sometimes project managers aren't aware that you need to do that. And ADA guidelines require things like, are you coding, are your colors proper for color blindness? Do you have enough contrast? Do you have enough size? All kinds of things. And all of those are going to be met by non-functional requirements. Does anyone have any experience with anything like this?
Hi, Thea. Yes, it's Bonnie Moorhead. I actually did some consulting work for a Department of Rehabilitative Services where they were building a custom new system. And so you are 100% correct. And I was the lead BA on that project. So I was working with within the department, different areas for the blind. I was working with one area where, I'm working with clients that were deaf. So you're absolutely right. And it was actually one of the best experiences because it made you more aware, I think, of the non-functional requirements. I think we had, sometimes as BAs get a little bit more comfortable with, I think we can't help but think of our own senses when we're and deferring to that, which is natural when we're writing requirements in addition to our experience in education, but trying to think differently about implementing a completely new solution really forces you to step outside your boundaries. And I think that was one of the best learning experiences, for myself and some of the other BAs as we were working on the project. So I enjoyed it, and I was thankful for it, actually. And I think it is having that different exposure to the different types of non-functional requirements that actually enhances my skill set as a BA. That's all.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I understand what she said. Like when I was doing my senior design project, I took the book, I was reading the book, the lecture, and what it does, like what requirements are, and I kind of understood, I had a good understanding. But when I started doing it and applying it, right, actually putting it into practice, that's when I learned a lot. Like I learned so much during my senior design project because I was learning. The teacher was teaching us, and she was going over like what just like we said, what requirements are, what functional requirements are, what non-functional requirements are, how you test, what usability is. But she gave us her lecture slides. Actually, gave us a lecture on on the actual topic, as is to be how to design the project. But when I was when I was actually doing it, like applying what I'm learning, is when I learned a lot because I was practicing, and then I was utilizing the requirements, like really doing the complete assessment of the project, and then writing down requirements, and I was following the actual layout of the project. That's when I learned a lot. So I think the best way to learn is to get exposure and do it, and then get hands-on practice, and then you grow a lot that way. I've grown so much since my senior design project. I struggled a lot, honestly, because there was a couple people in my project that had more experience than I do. They helped me out. Luckily, I had good team members. But I learned a lot because I was applying the knowledge. I was getting practice. Yeah.
Okay, let me talk a minute about getting your project manager or your management to buy into some of these things. There are two different elements that will cost your company or your project a lot of money and fines. One is not following ADA rules. I think it was Rhiannon that came out with the singer. They came out with a website that was like her music, and she did it all in these very sophisticated grays. And she got fined huge, like 500,000. And for her, that's not a lot of money, but for your project, it might be a lot of money. And you don't want to have to do rework ever. So if you know what your requirements are ahead of time, that's important. Things like not addressing things like the red-green color blindness, which is very common. Not only color code things, but also use symbols so people that are colorblind can see it, or high enough contrast for blindness, things like that. So you don't want to go across the ADA requirements. Also, there's privacy that you have to look at from Europe, from California, from Texas, and a couple of the other states are now adopting privacy guidelines. You need to figure out, and there are websites that talk about this. Currently, what is the most strict privacy guideline that you would have to consider? Just program to that originally. If you don't follow that one, there are huge fines that you don't want to have to encounter. So whenever you're doing your requirements, you set it up where you talk about what the as is state, what the to be state is, and who you have to meet for the to be state. That's going to be things like what the requirements would be for who has to use it, what they want to achieve by it, all of those things. Whenever we're talking about the requirements, you want to also be sure all of your stakeholders are able to review the requirements easily. And so you want to link your requirements so that they're in an organized fashion, because people get bogged down. You get down in the weeds. I'm sorry, let me explain that real quick. Whenever you first start a project, you start at the 10,000 foot level or the 30,000 foot level, way up in the sky from an airplane. And you're looking at the requirements as little modules on the ground that you can't really tell, but you can tell, okay, there's a square building down there, or there's a field or something like that. And as you get down into the project, you see things more clearly as you descend and you get down closer. Every time that you find a new requirement, you find a new group of requirements, you need to go back to your stakeholders and say, just to clarify, this is this is our current requirements. We've added these three because, and you may have told them the story of how you discovered them, but you need to validate that you have the right requirements for them. And will that make any impact on their perception, their needs, their requirements? And just be sure you have everyone on board, because you don't want to come to UAT testing and then go, why are you doing this? Or that's not what we need. You want to get to the approval before you go into development if possible. Bob, did you want to show us something else or talk through anything?
I'm just trying to show these slides support what you're talking about.
Bob, your framework takes the IIBA's BABOK and makes it elegant. And I'm hoping that we can incorporate a lot of it into the new version. Bob mentioned the PMI earlier, Project Management Institute. In a lot of ways, PMI is a much more mature organization than the IIBA. I've always called it the big brother. They started earlier, they are older, they've developed more, and we seem to be about 8 to 10 years behind them in our development from the IIBA. So whenever you find somebody who is active in PMI, they may have something to teach you as far as our organization and where we can grow to. So if you have an opportunity to get involved with your local PMI chapter or even online PMI, they often have classes. In fact, about 10 years ago, they came out with a business analysis certification, which caused all kinds of interesting conflicts between the two organizations. Both organizations deal with some Agile. There is a different organization called the Agile Alliance. There's also the Scrub Alliance. There's a couple of others. If you want to get into Agile, you can look at those, or you can look at our flavor or PMI's flavor of Agile.
Just so you know, I've also given presentations or webinars that compare and contrast the certifications and activities and all those, plus data analysis, cybersecurity, and more. So there's a lot of information out there on my presentations page. As always, watch the YouTubes at advanced speed. So there's more information about all of it. And I also listened to many hours, like 60 hours of presentations from the Scrum Alliance and talked about that. And there's a lot of overlap between what all these groups do. But the more you know, the better it is.
Right. We are at time, ladies and gentlemen. Is there any questions that we can answer for you today?
I have a question. I've been taking the watermark exams, and I noticed like chapter 11, I guess for the ECBA, will that not be on the exam from the BABOK?
Every chapter in the IIBA's BABOK will be on the exam.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I don't know the names of the chapters by the number. What's chapter 11?
And let's hold on to that. It's on the Agile.
Okay.
But I noticed like when I was taking the
Yeah.
ECBA, it wasn't up there. So I was like, well, is it not going to be on the regular exam?
It probably will be.
Okay.
So it's more of a, what that chapter talks about is more how you do all the stuff we do in these particular contexts. So Agile, I talk about business intelligence, I kind of talk about IT, we always talk about business architecture is your process flows and overall what your company does and how it's structured. And process management is one of two things and maybe both. it is how you solve problems. So it's both the solution having to do with the processes in that and also the engagement. So it's just the context in which you're doing all this work. And if you've been in more than one organization or consulted or served more than one customer, you already have a pretty good feel for what that chapter says.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's why it's important to get, you know, the BABOK definition and follow the structures of the BABOK. It's important not to go elsewhere because there's other definitions, you know. Like when I was doing like presentations, I was doing my research. I found different definition of different terms and different methodologies. And like even like the water, I was like, from my experience, you guys have more experience than I do, but like the waterfall method, and then what's the other? I forgot the name of the other method. Like companies like they use it differently, and then sometimes it can be confusing, you know. That's why it's important to follow the structure of the BABOK, especially like when you're getting certifications. You know, that's my experience.
Right. We had somebody scheduled to present next week.
Ben Hur is going to be presenting. Ben, you want to talk about what you're going to be presenting?
I'm not presenting. No one told me I was presenting.
Oh,
Or are you assigning me something now?
Might
I'm
be
sorry.
Marlon.
Yes, I'm sorry. It was Marlon.
Marlon, it's not me. I presented last week.
I agree. Marlon, are you?
Yeah,
gonna be presenting next week?
I'm next week.
Can you talk about what you're presenting, please?
Not right now. I'm still in the process of putting together my presentation.
Okay,
It definitely will be on the skill set that we need. Basically talking about the soft skills that we need to have as BAs. So that should be important. One of the lines of attack that I want to do for that presentation is how we apply what it looks like in the real world, because it's one thing to read the book and see, okay, you should have these skill set, but what does it really look like in practice for a BA? So I want to focus on that.
that's right. Good job. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing next week. As it's,
That's chapter 9, I think. Is that right?
Marlon, I think that's for you.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, perfect. Looking
Underlying competencies, that's what it's called. Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, that will be our 38th consecutive meeting, guys. Look at us go. If you know anyone who is interested in participating, please do invite them. We want to share this knowledge as far and wide as we can. It's been very successful for several of us. If anyone is still looking for a job, let me know. I've got recruiters contacting me on a daily basis, mostly looking for remote positions, people to fill remote positions, and I'm happy to help you. Contact me through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the only way I can find you because the recruiters are blogging up my email. Okay, anything else? And we will close it for today. Okay, Tish, I'm going to be calling you to work on your resume. I will be doing that in just a few minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you next week. Bye.
Talk to you guys later.
Do you mind staying on the call,
Bye-bye.
Tia? You don't mind for a second?
Yes, Ben, her.
Can I talk to you for a second if you don't mind?
Sure.
You see,
Okay, have fun, guys. See you next week.
Thank you.
you see. So I was saying is I'm applying for jobs. I've been doing like 2 to 3 interviews weekly. Like I have fun. Like I'm blasting my resume all of them. Indeed, Monster, Glassdoor, you know, everywhere, and I can't get it. I've been getting a lot of interviews, fun interviews. I go to the second step, but I'm not getting any offers. It's been over
Okay.
like almost 5 weeks now. Like I know I will eventually. When getting a job, it's the job itself. So I'm like all day. All I do is I just apply for job applications. So like I think something is like I'm doing something that's not right. I'm not getting results. Like why I don't know why I'm not getting offers.
Okay.
I'll go to the second step interview and then I just don't get offers afterwards. I got a bunch of rejection on my mailbox. So I'm trying to see maybe you can give me feedback what I'm doing wrong.
Okay, Ben, listen to me.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I appreciate that that you're going to interviews and that you're blasting your resume and that you're have good knowledge. You talk so fast, it blows people out of the water.
Thank you.
It's not that you're doing something wrong. Your enthusiasm is admirable, but you're going to have to calm down and present a more confident, steady persona, almost like you're putting on a mask as a actor. Because what happens is if you go into a workplace and you're talking really fast and you're all intense, there are some people that they can't handle that. And I bet you that they're concerned about bringing you in and people going, he gives me anxiety.
I
Okay,
understand.
I'm being absolutely candid with you. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
No, tell me the truth, because I want to work out. If you give me good feedback, that's the only way. I want people to tell me the truth, you know. I don't want people to kiss my ass. I've been like all my previous, like my parents, like I've been kissed ass. Like that's why certain things I couldn't achieve. Now I have coaches and mentors that tell me the truth and I work on it, I overcome. And that's how I've achieved so much now. You know, just tell me the truth. I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay, another thing is you interrupt a lot.
Okay, got it.
So you need to think about what you want to say and listen to what they're saying and let them finish before you respond to what they said, not what you want to say. It's kind of you know what table tennis is?
Yeah, I know. I play table tennis.
So this is what a conversation is. You have to present who you are and hand them the ball and let them respond. And they ask a question and then you respond to the question. And you have to think about what is it they're wanting to know. They might not ask the question well, but you know that they're looking for a business analyst. You know that they're not going to take an interview unless they want you to succeed because they don't want to waste their time with somebody that they expect to fail. So they're wanting you to succeed. They want to hear what you have to say. They want to see if you're a good fit. So to be those things, you're going to have to answer their questions, present the persona of someone who can be a good fit, who is a team player. You have to come across as genuine and sincere. To do that, you're going to have to practice in the mirror. I would record yourself, do a video recording and go through that. But I love your enthusiasm. There are some people it's going to blow them out of the water though.
Yeah,
You have to
I
go
talk
in
too
and
fast
say,
sometimes. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I talk too fast. And I tend to talk a lot, but I worked hard on my listening skills, something I've worked on. Because I was bad at listening, but I worked my butt off on my listening because my coach told me you really got to work on your listening skills, and I've gotten so much better. So there's nothing I can't overcome, with hard work. So
I appreciate that. I would suggest that you, Bob, maybe you can help me here. What is the organization where you practice making speeches?
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters. Ben, I suggest that you join a Toastmasters group.
I am a Toastmaster. I've been part of Toastmasters for the past 3 months now. Okay, very good. Yeah. Make speeches that are sincere, that convey emotion, emotional topics. I don't want you to get up there and cry. I want you to say, I want to tell you a story about a little boy whose family's house burned down, and tell them in a way to convey the information, but to get them to be brought into your story. And you have to say it slowly enough where people can understand every word, and don't just work on the words, but work on the way the words flow. I think that will help you a great deal. There you go. That's what I'm working on. And then I have some personal challenges, like family issues I'm overcoming. But good. I'm only going to get better. I promise you. I'm trying to get out of this environment. Because you got to be if you're going to nurture or you're going to grow as a human being, you got to be in a positive environment. Environment is so crucial in life, and I worked hard to overcome my challenges. So I'm only going to get better. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I want you to understand something. There is not one person you see that is not overcoming challenges. A lot of people understand the challenges that you're overcoming, or they can relate to it because they're overcoming their own challenges. Every single person has challenges. Some are horrific and they don't want you to know, but they understand that you're going through something too, probably. So
you take care of you, get yourself in a safe, good place, and just make forward progress. Even if it's one step, it's still forward progress. Celebrate your adventure and celebrate every forward step. Even if you wanted to do 10 steps today, you only got one done. That's one step further than you had yesterday.
Yeah, I have a coach that's helping me. I'm part of a mentorship program. So I try to get 1% better. That's my goal, to get 1% better every single day.
That's
Right?
excellent.
And trust me, I have come so, if you'd have known me a few years ago, you'd be like, wow, like you just met me. So you don't know the old me. But thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, I did not want to hurt your feelings at all, but
No, I'm glad you told me. I want you to hurt. Like you're not gonna hurt me. I mean, you're only gonna hurt me if you don't tell me the truth, right?
I understand. I understand.
I'm glad you tell me that. That's what I want, and that's what I'm not gonna be part of the group anymore if you keep kissing my ass. I don't like people like that kiss my ass. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to record yourself, and I want you to listen to how fast you talk on just a normal conversation. Because in interviews, when you're nervous, you'll talk even faster. So you have to calm yourself down and convey information to be sure they understand exactly what you mean.
Got it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'll see you next week, Ben-Hur.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.